Hi everybody, and welcome to Archives Live. I'm Samantha Mackey, and I'm here with David Peters, head of the OSU Archives. David, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Nice to be with you again.
Great, thank you. So this month, we are talking about the history of agricultural research at OSU. So, David, the Agriculture Experiment Station was established really quickly after OAMC was founded. How did the Ag Experiment Station come about?
Some might say it was established before the college came about. So, the citizens of Stillwater gave 200 acres, or provided 200 acres for the college and experiment station, all right? The actual college was located on roughly 5 to 10 acres. The other 190 acres was devoted to the agriculture experiment station. Now, there's some who say that the citizens of Stillwater and Payne County wanted the experiment station as much or more than they wanted the college. You have to remember, these are people who have just settled here within the previous year or two. They're coming from all over the country, and no one really knows what kind of crops, what kind of livestock, what's going to do well in this environment. So what they were hoping for was an experiment station where all those tests could take place, and then the experiment station then could make recommendations to them. So they were really looking forward to the experiment station as much as they were the college. The experiment station is established right away. I mean, the first classes are held, December 14th, 1891. The first thing that's going on campus, they're plowing the whole campus because they're going to convert most of it into an agricultural experiment station. The first buildings on campus are financed through Hatch Act. The Hatch Act was a federal program that provided funding for agricultural experiment research. And so Hatch Act funds are used to build our first building on campus, which was a barn, which is located roughly where, the used to be the College of Business building. I think it's a general administration building now. There was a barn at that location. The second building on campus was a chemistry lab that was also to be used for the agricultural experiment station. So you can see the agricultural experiment station really had a much greater impact initially on the Stillwater community than the college did. Now, one of the issues early on with the agricultural experiment station is there were some people who thought it should be a money-making proposition. So they should be in there growing what they need to grow, sell, and it should be a way to finance the college. Others looked at it as a source of seed. They wanted them to be able to produce seeds that then they would sell to farmers in the area. And actually, it took a while to convince people that really the research that was going on was the most important thing that they could do. And they began doing research almost immediately.
So what kind of research was the Ag Experiment Station doing?
So they brought in fruit trees, nut trees, just regular trees to see what kind of trees would do well in this environment, what kind of production they could get from those. The other trees were just brought in for making things like fence posts. Because you have to remember, this is an open prairie, and so they were trying to figure out ways to help farmers. And fence posts is one thing that farmers would need. We had a vineyard for a while. It would be right north of where Morrill Hall is now. So we had vineyards, fruit trees, orchards. We had then crops. They brought in all kinds of grain crops, corn, wheat, oats, you name it, barley. They tried to grow it. They brought in different varieties too of all of those things. They brought in then different breeds of livestock. So we had a number of beef cattle breeds, dairy cattle breeds, swine, poultry. Once again, you name it, we brought it in here. And we also brought in stuff from really around the world. We brought in varieties and breeds from England and other places in Europe, from South America and Central America. So they were really, it was kind of a smorgasbord of stuff they were trying, because they really didn't know what was going to do well here. So they tried a bunch of stuff. And most of that, all of that was under the direction of a guy named James Neal. James Neal was the first head of the Agricultural Experiment Station. He was our most experienced first faculty member, and in some regards, he was our first faculty member. A lot of things going on. They produced bulletins. These bulletins then were distributed to farmers across the territory, trying to share what their research results were. So it was an up-and-coming activity. Students, in fact, many of the students in agriculture had coursework that required them to work in the agricultural experiment station. So they had students engaged in hands-on labor helping the experiment station.
That's really cool. So how has the research at the experiment station evolved over the years?
Well, so initially they were trying to figure out really to help people with subsistence agriculture. And if you remember at the time, most of our population is agriculturally based, engaged in farming and farming activities. Of course, now, a very small percentage of our population is engaged in agriculture. And so what the Agriculture Experiment Station has allowed over this period of over 100 years is this transition from a large portion of our population to a small portion of our population being able to produce the food that's necessary to feed the state. So they've always been looking at more efficient ways of doing things, better breeds, improved varieties, and they're still doing that. But also you have to think agriculture is involved in some ways in all of our everyday lives. Even people who live in towns and communities. I mean, we do research with grass and lawn, Bermuda grasses, and so it just impacts all of our lives in a variety of different ways. So it's not just rural places with farms. Agriculture impacts all of our lives, especially, next week is Thanksgiving. I mean, if you're going to eat something on Thanksgiving, you could thank somebody involved with agriculture for that. So we need to be mindful of that. But what they do now is they really focus on not just production, but from taking agricultural produce from the field to the table. And so it's quite a process when you think of all the things that go along with that, with what has to happen with food for it to be safely consumed by people in their homes.
Great, thank you. So if you're just now joining us, I'm here with David Peters for Archives Live, and this month we are talking about agricultural research at OSU. If you have any comments, questions, or stories, you can put them in the comments below and we'll read them live on stream. So David, something that we've been talking about is like photos and looking through it, kind of the history and stuff. And I know we have a lot of photos to share today. Would you like to share with us?
I would love to. I would love to. And this is just a small sampling. I mean,
there's so many photos.
There's so many photographs. So this first photo, I think to me is just the epitome of Oklahoma Agricultural Mechanical College. This is a steam traction engine, and these are young men working on this traction engine. So you have engineers involved in agriculture. And actually, I can tell, but the building behind them is our first college building. It was a barn. And so but this picture is students working on steam traction engines. And initially, especially with agriculture and early agricultural experiment station, there was just a lot of hands-on activity. And so this is kind of the epitome of that. So I mentioned that first barn. We had other smaller structures and sheds, but our first significant large barn was this one here. It was located between where Willard Hall is and Whitehurst. So kind of that parking area between those two was where this large barn was located. Multi-level. You could bring livestock and equipment up into the second floor easily. There were ramps on both sides, and it was designed for all breeds. So we had horses in there, hogs, cattle, sheep. It was all designed for housing in this one barn, plus food and grain storage for those. Part of the reason why Theta Pond was built where it was originally designed as kind of a catchment area for the runoff from the barn, and also a watering hole for the livestock that were in that area. So, and these were some of the early pens that were set up. These were right near that barn, in which they were keeping, in this case, breeds of cattle. But they started building in more and more fencing and creating structure. This is the corral area. Much of the original campus was surrounded and partitioned off with barbed wire. Later they changed, got rid of the barbed wire and just put woven wire. So, but this was also, and this area is roughly well between Whitehurst and where Life Sciences East are now. So, at a certain point, the road we know as Farm Road, but began establishing newer barns along what we now know as Farm Road. And this is one of the first structures to be built along Farm Road. It was a dairy barn. Later it was used as a beef barn, and then it was destroyed by a fire in the 1920s, so we lost it. This is the area where human sciences is located. It was for a long time used as a vegetable garden area, but they tried different vegetables. So not only were they testing vegetable production in that area, but it also provide a source of food and nutrients for early students. One of the problems they had, I mentioned the vineyard earlier, that was over by Morrill Hall. They had to guard the vineyard when the grapes were ripe. The grapes were such a rare thing that students started helping themselves to the grapes before they could do the harvest, and so it was affecting the results by students snacking on grapes as they were going to class. So they actually had to put those under guard. But most of the vegetables in this area were just available for student use once research results have been completed. I don't know if they could tell in the background, but the background are the beginning of barns located along Farm Road. So that's the area along Farm Road. This was an early swine barn, and it was located roughly where the Colvin Center is now, back in that area. And this was an early poultry house. We had a large poultry area, and poultry were very popular. It was inexpensive to have chickens, and so chickens were quite common. And so recommendations coming out of OSU and the Agricultural Experiment Station helped families across the state of Oklahoma, because chicken meat is a real source of protein early on, and so a lot of chicken research. This was the next version. This was the poultry house, as they were increasing the quality of their research efforts. And then this shows the whole kind of poultry area. So the poultry house is on the left-hand side, and then all of those are poultry production areas to the west of that. And then Farm Road would be just to the right. Fairly early on, dairy was also considered very important, and so some of our grads may remember the dairy building that was located where the Henry Bellman Research Facility is now. There was actually an earlier dairy building where that little portico used to be by the east corner of the Student Union. I think it's now a delivery point, but there was an earlier dairy building. But dairy production for both milk, cheese, butter has always been very popular. They used to sell those products. I can even remember buying products after they moved to the newer dairy building.
Mm-hmm.
But students were actively involved in that. And we had a student from Japan who came here about 1914, 1915, specifically to study dairy science at Oklahoma A&M College. And so very popular and very great program. Agricultural research involved, students, like I said, doing hands-on activity. Here, students are grading corn, looking at corn cobs, and so they're learning how to evaluate corn production. Here's another group looking at cotton. We had cotton production on campus, and so they're grading cotton. Here's an example of early insect control. And so they're trying to. I'm not sure what they're trying to control, what insect infestation, but I think it's probably in fruit trees, fruit or nut trees. And so early insect control in our experiment station. So this is the area roughly the library lawn, just west of the classroom building, is where this picture was taken. This is just a later picture. Again, working with steam traction engines on campus, which was really the experiment station. This gentleman is Walter Bentley. He's significant in that, research is important in itself in learning about how we do things better. Bentley is known as really the father of agriculture extension in Oklahoma. And so he took on the role then of figuring out the best practices and best ways of sharing the information that we're learning in our research activity with agriculture with the state, how to reach the citizens of the state of Oklahoma. And he really makes that connection then, and the third part of our triangle of education, teaching, teaching, research, and extension. And so this is the third side of that triangle with Walter Bentley. And this is when his office was, I think, in Morrill Hall. But Bentley is critical to that. We had extension trains. We celebrated that a few years ago with the 100th anniversary of extension, but we would take more or less agricultural exhibits around the state, and visit people in their communities, and then let them go through the train and view kind of research activity that was going on. so they would benefit from what we were doing here. So extension trains. We'd also have people come to campus. Here's an example where on the right are tents that were used for classrooms and gatherings for training sessions, and then the other tents are, and the tents in the background, people stayed in them while they were on campus. We didn't have a lot of hotels in Stillwater at the time, but farmers from across the state and young people from across the state would come to our campus for specialized training, and mostly had to do with agricultural research. And I think all the buildings in this picture are no longer with us. So, but this would be the area roughly just west of the new Spears School of Business building. So, extension involved, working with people where they worked and lived. And so here's just an example of working with some farmers in Oklahoma. We would also bring people into Stillwater. We bring large groups and engage in practical activities, events. I believe they're probably doing some terracing in this one, and showing people terracing methods to help minimize erosion, soil erosion. So it's all very practical stuff. Here's just another picture. This is roughly where the School of Business building is now. And you might be able to, I love tractors, so we've got lots of tractor pictures. But this is also what was still considered a part of the experiment station farm. And that street there is Hester. So, we're still what we think of the east side of campus now, but most of campus in the old days was agriculture experiment station. So here's a picture. And people might be able to see in the center, a little bit to the left, is Boral Hall. And so that's the main cluster of buildings that were part of campus. This is in the 1920s. There was a diagonal road that headed straight northwest out of the campus, and then it turned and became Farm Road. And so that's how you got from campus to Farm Road, was this diagonal that stretched between the main campus and all the agricultural structures that were being built west of the campus. But you can see in this picture in the 20s, there's still a lot of agricultural fields between campus and what we know as Farm Road. So here we are along Farm Road, and this was an early dairy, actually it was our second or third dairy building, but it's along Farm Road. And this is another event where farmers, dairymen from across the state had come to Stillwater to look at new and improved dairy practices. It's just one of our barns early on, and also kind of the evolution of milking, and that's changed. And I don't have any pictures but how they do it today is just dramatically different. So these are just kind of the classic images of some of these things. We were also known fairly early on for our animal husbandry. It used to be called the Animal Husbandry Department. Now it's called the Animal Science Department. But beginning really at the turn of the 19th century, we began emphasizing the importance of improvements within breeds, looking at what happens when you cross breeds and what kind of resistance you create, or what kind of resilience or growth characteristics you improve on. So they've done a lot of work with animals over the years. The gentleman in this picture is Warren Blizzard. Dr. Blizzard was the dean of agriculture for a number of years, but he came out of the animal science or animal husbandry department, and here he is showing one of our Herefords. So as our animal science program developed, we needed places to engage in stock judging. We had an earlier stock judging pavilion that was built, I think, in the teens. But then this one was built in the 20s. And so the front part of this building is where the animal science or animal husbandry department had their offices and classrooms. And then the back side was an arena for practice stock judging. And here's a picture from inside of the old arena. It was one of my favorite buildings on campus. It was located just west of where the Noble Research Center is now. And so it lined right up with Farm Road. And so you can just imagine them bringing all of this various livestock when it came time for judging. From their holdings and pens, along Farm Road. They would just bring them down Farm Road to the arena, the stock judging arena. Here's just an example of, I believe they call it the Little International. There was stock judging competitions across the country, but there was one known as the International, And I think they referred to this as the Little International because it was held here. But students were given an opportunity then to practice doing judging. Here was one of our outstanding shorthorn steers. This was Royal Jupiter. He won at the National, and he was purchased by Firestone Fire and Tire Company, and they took him on a nationwide tour. He had his own little bus van thing, had a big window on one side. So that's Royal Jupiter. So stock judging has always been very important. Here's just another example of really kind of garden work in the area where human sciences is now. This happened to be during World War II, and so they were working a lot with victory gardens at that time. So even for farmers, they're probably producing and have gardens, but even for people in urban areas to produce local gardens, to produce food for during the war. Here's just a picture of some entomologists doing some insect identification. Entomology has been one of the longest running departments on campus. That first little chemistry building had a little cupola on top, so a little four-sided room on top with windows around it. But they put a light in there, and they would collect insects from that spot, so they could see whatever was moving through the area. They'd have lights on and collect insects from up there. So that's just an homage to the entomologists. And then I showed that picture earlier of the students with cotton judging, working with cotton. This was a cotton gin that we established on campus. So you don't think of really Stillwater as being a cotton producing area, but we have had cotton production here at different points of time. So like I said, that's just a quick run through from some of the images we have. Agriculture is probably one of our best and well covered areas for campus, and it's been integral to the development of the state and the impact it's had in Oklahoma State University. So
yeah, so something that's talked about a lot on campus and even around the country even is the Magruder plots. So what are the Magruder plots?
So well, first of all, the Magruder plots are named for Alexander C. Magruder. So I mentioned James Neal was the first faculty member hired and the first experiment station director. The second faculty member hired, I think, was probably Alexander C. Magruder. So Magruder comes here and he's working in agriculture. And after that first plowing was completed, he set up some plots where, and these were continuous field trials for wheat at plots where, well, it's located where Murray Hall is and Stout Hall. So where Murray and Stout Hall are now, the Magruder plots were established. I think that first cropping year was 1892, so they got it in right away, and so they would test what yields were impacted by fertilizers and amounts of fertilizers and combination of fertilizers, no fertilizer, compost and other things. So these plots go in 1892. They, I believe, are the longest continuous field trials west of the Mississippi River. So that means this is all west of the Mississippi. These are the most extensive and over time the most complete records we have for one area in crop production. And it's, well, it's associated with wheat mostly. Now, initially it was where Murray Hall and Stout Hall are. Well, when they built Murray Hall, they said, well, okay, we'll give up roughly half of the area for Murray Hall, but that's it. We're not going to, that's it. Well, so then by, I think in 1944, 43, 44, I'm sure there's some agronomists who can correct me. Well, then they wanted to build Stout Hall. Well, that meant they'd have to give up the rest of it. And they said, whoa, this is too important. So what they did is they physically moved the plots by layers, each individual plot by layers of soil out west, roughly 1 mile west, onto the agricultural experiment station now that we know is ag experiment station. And it's still marked. There's a marking out. If you ever go out to the experiment station, there's a marker that identifies the Magruder plots. And so they're able to move all of those plots to their new location and not miss a year of results. And so they were able to continue using that. It was amazing. It was an amazing feat to move that land. So I think that's part of their renown, is that they actually physically moved these plots further west about 1 mile. But started by Alexander Magruder. They're still collecting data on those plots, and it's an amazing story.
Sounds like it.
No.
So we have a question from our audience, and the question is, how about those tractors?
Gotta love tractors. You know, I really think tractors are the epitome of agricultural, Oklahoma Agricultural and Mechanical College. I mean, it's just a wonderful blend. You know, oftentimes the Aggies and engineers would fight about stuff, but in this case, they work together, and tractors become a real a source of power that enable us to produce more on larger plots of land than most parts of the world could. And so tractors were integral to the changes in agriculture. Also, I have a personal collection, and so I've just always enjoyed tractors. Can't have enough tractors. But to me, it's interesting to see how they've changed over time. You know, from the big steam traction engines to like Rumley oil pulls, and just the transition over time to what you have now. You have these huge tractors. Once again, you know, these guys can cover thousands of acres with huge tractors. So anyway,
right.
Love them tractors.
We also have a question from William, and he wants to know, how long has Ag Hall been the home of the Ag School?
So the College of Agriculture has moved. Originally, Morrill Hall, when it was built, served as the administration building and the home for agriculture. Then Whitehurst Hall, when it was built, it became the new home for the administration and agriculture. So seemed like administration and agriculture were closely associated. But Ag Hall, which we know as Farm Road and Monroe, that was built in phases. So the two wings that go east and west were built first. The first one, I think, was completed in the mid-50s. Then the next one was added on in the front. So by the early 60s, mid to early 60s, Ag Hall has become kind of the academic home for the College of Agriculture. To me, the experiment station still is kind of the home for agriculture at OSU.
So with all of this agricultural research, has OSU ever partnered with other schools or other organizations to conduct any of it?
Yes, we've partnered with a number of organizations, and even like currently, there's a project that we're working on that's looking at really economic inputs in crop production. And so, like years ago, my father worked with what's called host plant resistance, which they're looking at how you control insects in a variety of different ways. And what they're doing now is, I mean, that's just a minor part of this. What they're doing now is they can look at crop production and evaluate moisture, fertilizer content, and so they can make adjustments as they're going across a field. Some places may need more nitrogen, other places may need less nitrogen, but how do you control the inputs in crop production to maximize both the yield and the efficiency of the operation? And they're doing that in cooperation with several other colleges. I think we have roughly 2 million, I think, out of the big pot that we're a part of. But those kind of collaborations agriculture is known for. And a lot of that has to do with funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And then we oftentimes will work with other land grant colleges for those kinds of activities. So yes, we're still engaged in a variety of different things. And we do that oftentimes with partners. And we also do it not only with other colleges and universities, but we have now agricultural production businesses that sponsor or cooperate with us on partnerships as they're working on improvements. And once again, it's from production in the field all the way to the table. I mean, our Food and Agricultural Products Center, you know, looks at how you market and package and provide food safety for things in a way that people are meeting demand. So
we have a question from Allie, and she wants to know, why was our college an ag school? Like, how did it become one?
So by being a land grant college doesn't necessarily mean you're an ag school. But early on, I have to remember, Allie, in 1890s, most people in Oklahoma are working in agriculture. They're farmers. And so what you're going to do is provide the expertise that's going to help the most people. And so agriculture is the way you can provide information to the most number of people to improve their lives. So agriculture has been critical from the very beginning. Many of the land grant schools went by A&M, agriculture and mechanical. So Kansas State was Kansas agriculture mechanical. Iowa State was Iowa agriculture mechanical. So that's just a common theme. But it's a part of that land grant mission in those early years, especially, was to meet the agricultural needs of the population within those states.
Great, thank you. So one last question before we go. If somebody wanted more information on agriculture or agricultural research at OSU, where could they look in the collections in the archives?
So all of the ag bulletins and ag publications that came out beginning, I think, in 1892 or 93, we have all of those. If they're looking at historic information, we have that information. And much of that has been digitized. They can find that online, but we can help them locate that information. We have information on the weather. The Agriculture Experiment Station had weather notations for highs and lows and precipitation and wind speeds and all that kind of stuff. So depending on what they're looking at, they might want to look at some of our weather records that we have. We have Don Green did a book on the College of Agriculture as a part of the Oklahoma Centennial History Series. Those were produced roughly 25 years ago, but it's a fairly complete look at agriculture for the first 100 years of the college. And not only do we have that book, and the book is also available online, but we have his research materials in the production of that book. We've got a lot of material on agriculture. Various faculty members throughout the time of the college have donated materials. And then if they're interested in current research, the DASNR, the Division of Agriculture, Sciences and Natural Resources, or something close to that, have an excellent page where they have specific information on research, and you can go into different departments, the kind of research they're doing, general research at the experiment station. There's a lot of current information available online through the college, the Division of Agriculture, and they continue to produce bulletins. And so if you want updated information on something you're trying to do, that information is all available either through them or we also capture that information and make it available too. So there's all kinds of resources on agricultural research both in the archives and at the university.
Great, thank you. Well, David, thank you as always for sitting and chatting with us today. And of course, thank you to you, our viewers, for joining in on the conversation today in the comments and watching the video. If you liked it, you can go ahead and share it, and feel free to talk to other people about it. If you'd like to see more photos and posts, you can check out the Archives Facebook page. There's videos on OState TV and YouTube, and the websites will be listed at the end of the program. Thanks again for watching, and as always, we'll see you next month on Archives Live.